Amina Khalid was born in Somalia, and as an 8-year-old child at the outbreak of the civil war there, she fled along with her family as a refugee, eventually ending up in the United Kingdom. Here now she works for the Somali Initiative for Democracy and Dialogue as a program manager, an organization of which she is also a trustee. She also works for the Initiative of Change Sustainable Communities program as a consultant, a program that works with schools up and down the country and with communities. With Amina, we'll be discussing her plight as a refugee, her life in Somalia, her life as she fled from that country, and her life today in the United Kingdom. Welcome back to ANN Television. It's great to have you with us. It's great to be with you. And we have a special guest today, Amina Khalid. And Amina, you're from Somalia, originally at least. Well, there's more to that than meets the eye because there's a whole backstory to that, but we're going to come to that. You grew up in Somalia. You were born in Somalia. And we're going to talk about your life there. We're going to talk about your journey to the UK and how that happened. And we're going to talk about, now that you're fully British, your life here and how your experiences here. So it's quite a lot to begin with. Well, thank you for being with us in any case. Bless you. We'll start from the beginning. We'll talk about Somalia, if we may. Somalia in the Horn of Africa was for many years a very peaceful place, a place of harmony, a place where children could grow up together without any fear of the other or no fear of violence. And then tribalism and sheer aggressive lust for power led to civil war in that country, a civil war that ripped it apart and created first hundreds, then thousands upon thousands of refugees who fled initially across the Red Sea, heading for Yemen, and from there up and into Western Europe. This situation continues to this day with huge numbers of refugees from the Horn of Africa in general and Somalia in particular, fleeing through the failed state of Libya and taking the perilous journey across the Mediterranean Sea, hoping for refuge in Europe, and many dying in the attempt. We think your home country, I mean, your home country is now Britain, but nonetheless, your country of origin, Somalia, as a failed state. And we have these terrible tales about life there. But as a child, well, it wasn't all bad news, I guess, was it?
No,
tell us a little about how your childhood was.
Far from it. I often wonder what is this failed state that most people seem to talk about when talking about Somalia, because that is not what I have known. That's not what I was born into. I was not born into a country that was failed in any shape or form. I still recall at a very young age where Somalia was peaceful. There was a real sense of community, family, a real safety net. That's not the Somalia that most people know today, of course, apart from those from there. But then, unfortunately, in 1991, the civil war started, and that's where everything seemed to have, turned upside down.
So sad. And that civil war, well, it's no point in going into the rights and wrongs of it, but it was totally destructive of society. I mean, how did you experience that as a young woman?
Oh, quite traumatizing. I just feel like my all my dreams, hopes, and aspiration was taken right before my eyes, and there was nothing that my family or my loved ones were able to do. Having said that, not only not being able to do something about it, but losing people on the way as a result of the conflict. I think that was the most traumatizing part about it.
Mm.
1 minute everything is so great. My father was a Minister of Information, so I did come from a very well-off, respected family, and those from the community knew who we were and really respected us. And so from having that to the conflict and the war transforming everything upside down, especially at such a young age, I think it's very difficult to comprehend. So for a long time I found really difficult to make sense of it all. And it was quite a journey.
It was a war between two ideologies, two cultures. I mean, it's hard to. Again, I don't want to, but would you say between two different approaches to life? I mean, what was?
I mean, Somalis in general, we've always been blessed by the fact that we all share one faith. So unlike most other, countries where, people from different faiths tend to be fighting for what they believe in, we all tend to believe the same thing, that one God, whether you like to call it Allah or whatever. But as Muslims, that's what has always united us. But clanism now, on the other hand, the division of different clans or tribes, whatever, whichever one you like to use it, has completely destroyed communities at all levels in Somalia. And that has been going, and that has been an ongoing conflict.
So this tribalism, would that be the right
expression? The division between the south and the north, of course, who should be in power, who is in power, the conflict between the minorities and the majorities, being recognized, being valued.
And this is obviously ongoing now.
Oh, absolutely.
And completely. And that for your young life, because what you were quite young when the Civil War was raging.
Yeah.
In your young life, that, I mean, the violence, you saw family members killed and this kind of situation?
Of course. The killing, the kidnapping, people disappearing in thin air and not actually knowing what happened to them. Yeah.
So harrowing. So, and this destructive, this complete catastrophe in Somalia led your family to leave. This is
Absolutely.
What forced you out.
Yes, of course. It was no longer a safe place for us to remain, and we just had to seek refuge wherever we could.
Are there many refugees from Somalia? There's a significant proportion of the population.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So you, I mean, just for the, and just to picture the Somalia, I mean, you're in the Horn of Africa. You have Eritrea and Ethiopia below you, and above you, Sudan, I guess.
Yeah, so Somalia is right on the tip, so it's is in East Africa.
So right on the tip, with just a little small Somaliland, which is a small area on its own, and then, but Somalia is that whole chunk, with no real. Well, it has a government, but it's a government that doesn't have control over the whole country. Yeah,
they've been going through a transitional period for quite some time. I mean, I'm sure at one point, and I hope very soon, there will be a time where we could actually have a permanent government. I'm very hopeful that will happen. But I think we need to work at that, but we need to work at actually uniting Somalis first, before we can find any kind of stability or security.
Of course you do. Wow, so there we have it. You're running from Somalia. Well, let's hear about your journey, because this is what drives you out. You're living happily, going to school, presumably. And what age were you when you left? About
I was about 7.
7, so just a young child. And then you and your older, well, you had older brothers and sisters and younger, and your entire family has to leave. Well, let's talk about this because this is where it becomes both harrowing and interesting. Europe has 2 main strands for refugees, creating its current refugee crisis. One is from the Horn of Africa and from the Sudan, from areas like Darfur, where refugees are fleeing to Libya and across the Mediterranean Sea into southern Europe. The other, of course, is from Syria and Iraq, through Turkey and into Greece across the Aegean Sea, and many of those refugees are having a bitter struggle coming into Europe from the east. This crisis is creating major tensions within Europe, not least in the United Kingdom, where we will see a referendum on June the 23rd as to whether Britain remains within Europe. You left, but you didn't come to Britain directly, and explain that to us.
I wish that was the case. Just straight from Somalia, from a conflict zone to a safe haven.
Yeah.
Far from it, unfortunately, but it was quite a journey, one that I must say I'll never forget, and I carry it with me wherever I go, because it's part of, the memories that I cherish. Very painful, but it's what has made me who I am today. So I suppose there is a sense of beauty leaving Somalia, having spent days traveling from one place to another before reaching Yemen, our second home.
Now you are originally from the your family is from the
Yes.
Hadramaut. So your family you were brought up in Somalia. You're a Somali girl, and Somali was your language. But originally, your father and mother came from Yemen.
From Hadramaut, yes, from Yemen, our
extraordinary.
oldest but most beautiful city. And I think this is a part that most Somalis, especially those from the south, tend to forget almost telling that part of the story, which is really what makes up the jigsaw. Because I think in the minds of many Somalis, for as long as that country is where you were born at, that's where you come from. But I think it's really important to know your roots. And I have to say, it's only maybe up until very recently I began to do a bit of research background around my roots beyond just being from Somalia. So what is my connection to other countries, neighboring countries, where my ancestors come from, why they decided to move from one place to another. And
why did they move to Somalia? Your ancestors moved from the Hadramaut. Well, your ancestors, no, your parents.
yes, so my
Parents were born in the Hadramaut, in Yemen. They moved to Somalia, really for economic reasons, I suppose.
Absolutely. Well, at that time, Somalia and Yemen, they used to do a lot of trading. So the going back and forth was a very natural thing because it was safe to do so. And the sharing of resource was very much embraced. Today, you can no longer do that. Forget about, sharing resource with your neighboring, countries. You can't even share resource with your next door neighbor.
Yeah. So you did the natural thing. Your parents took you back to the Hadramaut.
Well, we actually went to Yemen, to Sana'a, so the capital.
Right.
So that's where our house was. So so we stayed in Sana'a for almost a year.
So you made that journey. That was not too difficult, or was it?
it was difficult because we traveled by boat. And
Yeah.
again, this is maybe something that I've really never talked about, because, you know, that journey from Somalia to Yemen, traveling by boat, knowing that a lot of people actually did not even make it across, but we did.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
I mean, this is really a second chance in life.
And all your family were with you on the boat then?
Yeah.
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 And you, at this point, you all arrived safely in Yemen,
Mm-hmm.
and then settled in your house there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
Well, then it was from Yemen, then we started to sort of travel to Europe.
So you felt
And
that you would have a better chance if you really, you wanted to get away from all the problems.
Yeah, a safer place rather than, I mean, at that time, a better chance was not a priority. What was a priority was to be in a safer place.
Mm. Mm.
And, you know, to settle down somewhere in Europe made sense. And my father had left Yemen before us. So he happened to have come to Great Britain before us. But he left my mum with 5 children, and so to continue that journey on her own, that was quite difficult.
So she was there with you in the house in Yemen. Your father had gone ahead to Britain.
To pave the way, and then she was.
So what happened on your journey then, as you went?
As we came to Britain?
Yeah.
That was an interesting journey, because I do remember as kids, of course, we were very excited coming into a place that was totally new, where you wouldn't actually hear the sound of ceasefire, and you don't hear no screaming and shouting and children crying and people escaping from one end to the next. But actually, yes, civil war was no longer a problem. But what became an absolute obvious issue was becoming part of that society. I remember I started my secondary education when I was only 13. And that was so difficult. I mean, not being able to speak the language, not understanding the culture and where people are coming from, what they're saying. And I did not even have a limited English. I actually didn't speak any at all.
So, I mean, before we get on to life in the UK, which we have to talk, I still feel we should talk a little bit more about your journey, because it sounds, I mean, obviously it was a traumatic journey, and I think it's putting you on the spot and it's very unfair, but I would like to know a little more about what happened to you on that boat trip, because it's the same experience as so many refugees have today, here and now. And perhaps you could just, it's unfair to ask you, but perhaps you could just tell us a little about that journey.
Where do I start? I think it's, once you step on that boat and you know it's literally a matter of life and death, and you're really putting your life in the hands of God, as we do every day. But it's you can actually see it so clearly what could happen, and knowing that you've had people who've really never made it through, but yet you choose to take that journey. I think this is the part that maybe sometimes people forget, as to why are we risking our lives. You're risking your life because you don't have any other choice. What choice did we have? You remain in Somalia, and you can get wasted in the same way as everybody else, and you disappear. And you get on that boat, you don't know whether it will stay and you'll make it, or it will sink. The one which my family was on, it did make it. But then we had 2 other boats behind us, and those we had, some of our family, extended family members were on that boat. Some of them never made it. We're talking about young children, as young as 3, 4, because of famine, because of hunger, not being able to, to stop and just to feed your child, to give him or her water, the very basic necessity of life.
So children died on the boat, and then
and their bodies being thrown into the sea because you can't keep them in there. And I remember my mother telling me very recently, and I never knew this. I mean, for God's sake, I'm 32 and I hear this story just now, that she told me one of the ladies on that boat had her child on her lap and passed away out of frustration and distress because she was not able to,
to feed them, breastfeed the child,
to be breastfed. And when she lost her child, she, for a good number of hours, she was telling everybody else that her child was sleeping because she wanted to hold on to that child that slightly little bit longer.
So tragic.
Yeah, because she knew that she would never be allowed to make it to the other side and give her child a proper send-off. So holding on to her for dear life, that little bit more just meant the world to her.
Because the child would have to be buried at sea. It would have to be put over the side. Yes, which is presumably what happened. And so quite a loss of life in coming over from Somalia to, I mean, to Sana'a. Terrible thing. And traumatic for your family as well, no doubt. But okay, well, we will pass on to the next stage of this whole story. And we'll talk about Britain, if we may, and life here. When refugees finally end up in Britain, they have to face quite different challenges. The challenge is to be integrated into a society that sometimes resents their arrival and sometimes welcomes them. Some counties in Britain are currently taking staggeringly small numbers of refugees. The numbers are considerable. Indeed, nobody has any clear idea how many will be coming and how many have come. Europe is torn apart by the tensions created by this new influx of refugees and the challenge created by the need to do our duty and accept and integrate our fellow human beings in their time of trouble. I mean, you arrived in the UK and were greeted well, or what? I mean, you had to come through the border in the first place. Did you fly in? You flew in and claimed asylum, or?
Yeah.
So you flew in.
I mean, you're greeted as well as you could be, I suppose. So anybody opening their doors to you, that's a welcome. But sometimes you need something slightly more.
So you and your family asked for asylum. They were here. And then, in that situation, as a refugee without permanent right to remain, you're still a fairly young child, 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
You were in London, and you were sent to school, presumably right away, almost. I mean, I don't know. Did you speak any English?
No English whatsoever.
So that must have been difficult.
It was difficult. It was an exciting period to see, and you know how much I suppose parents can push their children to succeed. I remember
Yes,
when we were
yes.
on the waiting list, you know, to get into the school, that my father used to take us to the library all the time and pick up these children books, and so that was his way of you know, giving us a head start in life. And I don't know how many parents do that, but he, you know, in his mind is that by the time those school doors were open to you, you would go in with something.
Yes, yes.
Because you come into a country and the first thing you think is that yes, I have been you know, made welcome, but how can I show some kind of appreciation? Teaching basic things like thank you and welcome and please. This is very important.
You find the culture, I mean, there are differences, aren't there? The British people are more interested in, well, they tend to say please and thank you quite a lot. They're very bad at greeting and saying hello and goodbye. They don't do it as well as in the Middle East. I don't know about Somalia.
Yeah.
So there is this cultural difference where a British family might seem rude because they don't give the same greeting. But were there other cultural difficulties for you as a young Somali girl at that point in arriving in
I mean,
British?
the greeting is always an interesting one because, you know, even as a young girl, I remember the first time when I came in and with the very basic word that I knew of saying hello, people would just look at you up and down and think like, do I know you? Whereas where I come from, you greet everyone, you know, warmly, because it is part of that culture and it is part of you saying that here I am, you know, I am present and I respect you. It's a sign of appreciation and respect and love, which I'm not quite sure how some British people might receive that. And I think even now, you still see that happening. So there is not the general, you know, exchange of pleasantries and the greetings, which makes such a huge difference in bringing people together.
Yes, yes. It is extraordinary how abrupt we are compared to other countries of the world in terms of our greetings. But there were other problems, presumably, for you. I mean, you went straight to school.
Yeah, I started school when I was 13, so secondary education, straight into it. You know, not speaking the language and not understanding the culture and not understanding whatever else that was around me. And I really felt like I was just dumped in there to somehow, in my mind, it was certainly not, you know, integration, but it was more of assimilation. If you know, if you want us to accept you, you need to become one of us. And at the time, I thought like, how can I become one of you if I actually don't understand your way of life? And that was quite a journey. It was difficult because I remember, you know, being subjected to bullying and discrimination and racism, the usual remarks of go back home. You don't belong here, what are you doing here, a refugee, oh my God, you never become one of us.
And this was, I mean, commonplace, this bullying and this intimidation in the schools?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, I went to 4 different schools as a result of that.
That's
And it took me a long time to settle down. And, you know, for a while, I did not tell my parents what was happening, because in my mind is, how could I possibly share and let them know that I'm having a torrid time at the place where we are now supposed to be calling home.
Yes. Very, very harsh.
And conscious of what they had been through themselves, that I didn't want to be a burden.
So this form of prejudice, I mean, you had to deal with that at your school, at your secondary school. Did it persist through life, or has it been uniquely your secondary school where the problem was?
Secondary school was the worst. And I suppose because now, of course, you've got more people coming into the country, so we are starting to accept and to embrace people from all walks of life, whereas 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't quite the same. And if I went back to some of these schools, I'm sure even their policies might have changed. So I suppose that guides people, although one cannot legislate the attitudes of individuals.
And these schools, I mean, they were integrated schools, and you had all this problem. Would it have been better if they'd been single faith schools and you've just been with Muslim children? Do you think it would have been better?
To be quite honest, I've never thought about it, because in my mind, people are people.
Yeah.
I come from a family where different faiths and different cultures have always been embraced. So I was never raised in a community that was divisive. And I suppose this is probably one of the things that I really miss most about home, even after being...
Well, the arguments, no.
No, the sense of community.
I see what you mean, yes.
The sense of community where everyone is the same, whether you're black or white, whether you're Christian or Muslim, is because we come together based on our common values.
And that, in fact, is what we're lacking here, is that sense of community. I mean, people feel disempowered and disenfranchised and not part of our society because they're not embraced by our society. What is the remedy for that? Should we be more embracing of the other, more inclusive, and more the Christians amongst us? Should we invite you to our homes and our churches? Should we? It's a lack of hospitality that, or is it? What is lacking in Western society?
It's a difficult one, because I think there are so many different factors which contribute to what we are seeing today, and the remedy, if you like to call it cannot only be one thing. Whilst maybe for one particular group or one particular community, it's about just making them feel at home, because being at home and feeling at home is not the same. The connection that one makes with where they are.
So they need to feel at home.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the question may be, how do I make someone feel at home?
So this sense of community that we all seek, we all want to belong. Is that when we have a breakdown in our society, like we do with young people going to ISIS or whatever, is that because they don't have this sense of belonging to our society? Is that essentially where the flaw lies? I mean, it must be, mustn't it?
Pretty much that, really. I mean, if you think about it, has enough of us asked ourselves and each other the big question of, what is it that we are actually, not giving to our children or our younger generation that the group they join in are? What is it that is capturing their hearts and mind? Because this is a serious thing. I do not believe that a child who has a happy home, mom, dad, sisters and brothers, a loving environment, even if they don't have both parents around, but a loving and nurturing environment that makes them feel safe and secure and they can be their absolute true self, would even think for a single moment that there is a better world out there.
So our society is flawed by not embracing those from other cultures in our midst. If we fail to embrace them, if we fail to engage them, then we're a broken society, and really that's part of the root cause of many of our problems, isn't it, really?
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just, those from other walks of life, but also, I mean, you will see that a lot of young people who've now joined ISIS happen to be, born in this country.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Highly educated.
Do you, I mean, you are, let's lay it on the line here, you see yourself as completely British?
Yeah, I do.
You hesitate. No, you do. Presumably. I'm putting words into your mouth. I mean, my assumption is that you can have, in a sense, two nations and still be fully part of. Or would you say that was wrong?
You can, but I think in order to get to that stage, one needs to truly understand who you are and what it means to belong.
So, and do you, I mean, it's an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you get prejudice now? I mean, at all? Do you notice it?
Oh, absolutely. Ever since, we've had the Paris attack, and then, of course, there was the arson attempt in Finsbury Park in North London, which I live about maybe 15 minutes away from there.
On the attempt on the mosque?
Yes.
Well, the community centre, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, but the mosque as well.
Yeah.
So there was the community centre, but this one I'm talking about in Finsbury Park, that was at the mosque.
And ever since you feel, I mean, well, that of course was Islamophobia writ large. It was more than Islamophobia. That was real racial hatred that drove that. But I mean, or racial hatred of the Muslim community, I suppose, or something, some misguided sense of and we get these incidents. But for you personally, do you find you don't come across?
Well, you do get the odd looks, and I remember being called names just very recently, or somebody would ask you pathetic questions like, "What are you going to do about ISIS?" So, am I one of them? Should I have the answer to it? Do you not also have a responsibility to contribute towards your society, to do something about it? And doing something about it, because ISIS is not a person, it's an ideology.
No.
So what's the best way to fight an ideology? You come up with the new ideas and you fight with that.
And the new ideas being this sense of belonging here.
A new narrative.
Yes.
A new positive narrative where really the frustrated young individuals can actually think, oh wow, actually we are being cared for. Someone is listening to us. Someone loves us. Someone is interested in what we have to say, in what we want to be, in what we want to become. Now, I'm not hearing that.
Is an ideology necessary for that? Do you need to give an ideology or to?
I don't know whether one would call it an ideology. These are all different terminologies that we tend to play around with. What it means to you might be totally different to what it means to me, or what it means to another younger person. But I think we need to change our story. We need to change our narratives, and we need to. The media plays such a terrible role in all this. I know it's propaganda, but when you've got the media telling you that all Muslims are terrorists and they're terrible, and it's all about war. When you hear of jihad, where actually in its true sense, Islamically speaking, that jihad is really the inner struggle of the self.
Yes.
And yet no one talks about that. But instead, there are people putting emphasis on holy war. There's nothing holy about war, whether it's in Islam or in Christianity or any other religion, for that matter.
Exactly. I mean, war is barbaric, isn't it? it is the opposite of civilization. People talk about civilization and primitiveness as being opposites, but they're not. They're just on one scale. And then, I mean, I remember reading a book by Ursula Le Guin. She said the opposite of civilization, the absolute opposite of civilization is war and anathema. But that said, you're experiencing hostility here. Is it? I mean, partly because you call it the hijab.
The hijab, the headscarf.
The headscarf. Do you think that creates hostility, or is that? I mean.
Oh, absolutely, because this, in the minds of many people, Muslims have a certain image. So when you see this, immediately you can tell that it's a Muslim person.
Now, if you were living in again, because I think we should talk about these issues. If you're living in France, then officially anyway, the hijab would be illegal. You couldn't wear, you couldn't dress as you do now. Whereas in Britain is a freer society. In France, integrationalism is taken to the nth degree. Now, obviously, or stating the obvious, you think the French approach is wrong, I presume.
Of course.
Because we should be tolerant of different cultures.
I don't even like this term tolerance. I don't know, there's something about it that I don't like, because to me tolerance means that I'm tolerating you because I have to, rather than because I want to. I want to be able to move from toleration to acceptance and respect. I remember the Member of Parliament of Shoreditch and Hackney, Meg Hillier, once said in our recent training workshops on Peace Begins at Home, she said that do not be deceived by the fact that Hackney is a diverse community. It is, but in its true meaning, what is it all about? We really need to move from toleration to interest. From toleration to interest, and actually genuinely being interested in the other.
So total respect for all, by all, and not toleration.
And acceptance, to really accept the other for who they are.
And that's without limits. I mean, you would say, so you would accept the gay community or any other community. It's not limited. You're not making that exclusive for yourself.
I think everything should have a limit. We say that a little bit, a bit of too much is never good. That we should really have a sense of balance, wherever that balance is. It's not to say that everything should be done
acceptance.
limitly.
I mean, we should all. We're avoiding the word toleration because that's, as you rightly put, as you rightly say, that's flawed language. And I used it. And I apologize for it, but it is completely wrong. So we're saying we accept and respect one another. But if we accept and respect one another, we must all accept respect, put an equal value on, and that would apply to Christian or Muslim, believer or non-believer, and presumably to straight or gay, to every, black or white. It applies across the board, doesn't it? I mean, because I think it's important, and the more I think about it, the more I think it is important to have a total, absolute, uncompromising respect for the other, which actually we have to be vigilant and not tolerate any lack of respect in ourselves for anybody else. It's because it's easy to to place a division somewhere and say, okay, well they're gypsies, so we don't like them, or well, they're Romanians, so we don't like them, or whatever it might be. And of course, we're talking about migration. The largest numbers coming into this country are East European now, by huge, vast levels, because I think the net migration from within Europe is something upwards, has been up to 500,000, I believe, in recent years. So, and Devon and Cornwall, I think Devon, if you're talking about refugees from the Middle East, I believe this year Devon will take 8 families and Cornwall will take 3.
Yeah.
So it's not going to, not exactly very challenging for them, or for us, I should say, because we're all, well, you've spent time down in the West Country, and I am from the West Country.
But even that, there was for some time, it was quite a scare. 3, refugee families. What are we going to do with them?
Yes.
And you think like, wow, they're just like you.
Yes.
Welcome them.
Yes, exactly.
I spent quite a bit of time with my colleague working in schools and reaching out to the faith leaders and the community leaders.
This is in Cornwall,
in Cornwall, in Penzance, and in Truro about this. And then you've got those who might not be, experienced enough to take care of these families coming in, but who are wholeheartedly opened in actually, bringing them into their home and giving them that safe haven. And I think that's really important, recognizing that. But for those who say, well, what are we going to do with them? This is not the place they should be. Are we really in a position to say that?
Yeah. So, but yes, because the business of these, my family home is halfway between Penzance and St Ives, and I met you down there. The business of these families coming down, these very small numbers of families, it's ironic because the people in Devon and Cornwall have been perhaps almost more generous in their support for refugees financially than other parts of the country. The many, huge effort has gone into supporting Syrian refugees from people, from ordinary people in Devon and Cornwall. And yet you get, almost in the same breath, you get people from the same communities saying, when it comes to accepting 1 or 2 families, that, well, it's fine as long as they don't come here. So this paradox of enormous generosity and then fear of the other, which is very strange, but very human perhaps, but also we must overcome it because it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. See, now that's condescending on my part. It's not ridiculous. People have fears.
And it's okay to have those fears. I mean, this is the fear of the unknown, really.
Yes.
But I think the more you step out of your comfort zone, the more you realize that you're not that different. I mean, there was nothing more scary for me than to work alongside communities and individuals who were very hostile towards me, who I had the most horrendous experience when I first came into this country, but yet I had decided to become a peacemaker. But I suppose my reason for that is that, coming into a new place where I'm now calling home,